Hello, and welcome to this week's edition of Victory Never Sleeps. And it's that time of the month again. No, not that time. It is time for Adulting with Alan. This week, Alan is going to tell us how to properly position his camera. No, today we're going to talk about parenting. And I think it is a topic that there's a lot of different angles to, but is really important, and I think hits home with a great many of us, and it's a topic that a lot of people frequently have questions about or wonder about. So I'm looking forward to this one. I think it's definitely something important, and hopefully you guys will all enjoy it. So this week is starting out as usual with GW Farnsworth donating $25 to VNS and $50 to Freyshoff. Speaking of which, I have
Is there news?
There is news. So I have been kind of teasing it for a few weeks now and disclosing as much as the other guy on the screen would let me do without haranguing. So trying to do it responsibly, but now I have the tremendous honor of announcing to all of you, we now have Freyshoff, the fifth Hoff of the Ásatrú Folk Assembly. It is a lovely building on a lovely property, and I have every confidence that it is going to the best of our ability, honor Lord Freyr and accelerate our gifting and our relationship with him in a way that hopefully he finds very pleasing. But yeah, a lot of, as you guys know, your generosity is what makes these kind of things possible. I know I come at you every week with my handout. It's for stuff like this. We have had people trying to make this a reality for a very long time. We have had, literally hundreds of people hoping and dreaming on this. And I am so glad that it is finally there. It is real. It exists. And I am looking forward to seeing it and to celebrating it and to worshiping Lord Freyr there for decades to come with my AFA family. So there you have it. It is in Ohio. It is in Austintown, Ohio. It's on a lovely piece of property. And thank you guys for everything that you've done to make that possible and to support the progress all along the way. And we appreciate you guys very much.
And a special thank you to the finder of the property. Starts with a C. I was going to let you do it.
No, go for it.
Okay. Cliff Erickson and his beautiful wife, Katie, and their family found this property, went in and inspected it, made sure that it was right and fitting for Lord Freyr and for the Hoff, that they will grasp the reins of and make into something wonderful. So congratulations, Cliff and Katie, and to all the folks in the Northeast region for this beautiful, wonderful property, and to all of us who have contributed and stood their part in the shield wall while we made this into a reality.
Absolutely. We've had a number of people who have really been champions on doing this. This has definitely been a team effort to get where we were going on it. I know it's been kind of a long road because it's hard because when we talk about, the build up to the next Hoff, there's all of the paying down and eventually paying off of Njordshof, and then finding a place, and then finding a lender. This is also made possible by a very special donor who wants to remain anonymous in the Odenshof district that was able to lend us the money for this Hof. So we are very appreciative of him and his tremendous trust and generosity in doing that. And we excited isn't quite the word for it, but take that and multiply it exponentially. So I'm excited to share that with you guys this evening. And there you go. There you have it. I'm sure, any questions you guys might have, we may or may not know the answers to them, but we're happy to take a shot at them. As always, our show is heavily question and answer driven. So if you guys have questions, let us know. And if you have questions at any time throughout the week, vns@runestone.org, and we'll make sure to get them on the show. We have a couple of those, 2-3 of those we've had emailed in that we'll answer today.
When has not knowing the answer ever slowed us down?
It's just a bump in the road. It's a minor. We don't let that deter us. So might as well throw it out there. We are raising money now to pay off Freyshoff. If you want to donate to that effort, donated link is on the board. We have so we don't have the fancy thermometer up yet to show you all the stuff, but we are $125,000, of which we are $19,060 towards that goal. So you guys are awesome. We are impressed. We're humbled. We are appreciative. That said, Lawspeaker, tell us about parenting.
Parenting. Where to begin? First, I'll say I'm the proud father of 3 beautiful children who are luckily alternatively pains in the neck and rarely all at one time. Now 30, 27, 25, although they never get all the way off the payroll somehow. So when I think of this, like the framework of parenting, one of the things that when I frame the AFA and what is to me a radical traditionalist approach to life and the universe and everything, the way I always tend to frame that when I'm watching modern culture, and I see a lady, female, in some, in a position of society who's like, why shouldn't women work, right? But and I know that's become the modern standard. And it's not that they're not qualified and that they're not equal in many ways to what men can do. But the most important thing, and the job that has gone undone in Western civilization for 60 or 70 or 80 years now, is the job of rearing children. If you think about the way that an intact society raises its children, where all the neighbors know each other and the women are home sort of supervising. And I know that's an old-fashioned way of looking at things, but I'm an old-fashioned guy. You could take the fashion out of it and it would still be true. But the most important thing that we can do is to give our children a right view and a right raising, so that when they are old enough to flee the nest, that they are making good decisions, that they have a good, intact, resilient personality, so that when they are assailed by the winds of modern, what would one use? The modern zeitgeist that opposes us in so many ways, that they are able to stand firm against the tide of incredible idiocy that seems to reign supreme out there. So along that line, I mean, I where to begin? Certainly I can say that I made mistakes coming up. There's stuff I would do different. There's a lot of stuff that I did that I would do the same. A couple of, I guess we could start with just like sort of a few pointers and generalizations. Like for me, I'm a big fan and a big advocate of attachment parenting. As the, I think it's a husband and wife couple, the Dr. Sears approach to that. They were the advocates, maybe the first strong advocates of attachment parenting, which, it sounds like some great modern innovation or whatever. But I mean, if you look back just a couple of hundred years before the Western canon tried to systematize child rearing, I mean, that's what everybody did. That was just the way that kids were raised. The child was always with you. We did co-sleeping with our kids. I think that's a big benefit. I think a lot of the psychological issues that come around with kids now are from early issues that, where the doctors tell you, let him cry it out. Don't pick him up. All which terrible advice, I think. I'm not a psychologist, just a guy who's been observing what's been going wrong with Western civilization since I was old enough to notice. First of all, I don't think, the thing about young parents, don't have a lot of guidance, I don't think. I think too often we live in this atomized universe where the parents are over, the grandparents are over here and the parents are over here, maybe in different cities, because you've moved 2 or 3 times trying to chase a job and there's not a good support network out there. I mean, there's all sorts of chaos that contributes to the stress that young parents rightly feel. They're afraid they're going to make mistakes, but guess what? You are. But for the most part, if you have good intentions and act in good faith, you're going to get it right most of the time, most of the way. And that's, I think, the best that anybody can hope for. I think so. If there was one thing that I would ask parents and young parents to be, first of all, I would encourage the reproduction of healthy white children, or at least practicing the attempt. In addition, I think if you act in good faith and consciously and mindfully, then you're going to get it right most of the time. Beyond that, I mean, there are lots of fine points that I could go into about my experience and, what went right and what went wrong. Certainly one of the things that I think is very important, and I'm encouraged to see the vast majority. First of all, let me say, the vast majority of the children that we interact with, certainly in Nordshof and when I go to other Hofs, the kids are so normal, and so well adjusted. It's so encouraging to see our kids. Our kids are the normal ones, right? And the whiny, neurotic kid, that's like all the other normies out there that are following this terrible advice from decades of arguably well-intentioned but misdirected Western child rearing technique, where I could look back at the journals that my mother kept when I was an infant, and start me on solid food at day 3, terrible mistake. Baby should be nursed, and blah, blah, blah. So, we have all that. Long before I became a parent, I guess when I was first starting the path back toward something that looks like a traditionalist viewpoint on life, I read about the struggle that especially Germanic parents, and that's, the Aryan parents, have, because we try to raise our children in a way that they are mostly compliant, mostly obedient, but without breaking their spirit. And that's a delicate balance, because it's easy to, to beat them down, browbeat them, literally beat them. That's a terrible idea. Until they lose their own personality, and yes, they will do exactly what you say out of fear and cowering, but then they will become terrible adults. And I think that's a lot of the issue that we see in some of the other civilizations that we interact with. That's the way they raise their kids, to be, totally subservient. And it's a delicate balance, because, you have to raise your kids to do what you say most of the time. You'd have to tolerate some questioning. And I hear it over and over again. Certainly we said it, like, we are never going to say, when we had little baby in arms, I've got a picture, should have brought it. But when we had the little baby, I'm like, we are never going to say, because I said so. Like, we're going to explain to our children why you should be doing what we say. And, it's going to be all rational. And but it turned out to be, that was the third explanation, right? Why should I have to do this? Because if you don't, then, something bad's going to happen. Why should I do this? Because I'm the parent and I know better and I've got years of experience, and, you should do it because it's good for you. But why? Because I said so. I mean, you could explain stuff to the heat death of the universe, and they're still going to ask you another question about it. So at some point, you just have to comply. It's funny. I could even name the heathen, no longer with the AFA, but he was talking about walking through a grocery store in California, and this 4-year-old is laying on the floor of the grocery store, literally screaming and kicking her legs and not wanting to do whatever it was the parent said. And the parent is standing over her going, do we need to have a meeting? Do we need to have a meeting? Yeah, you need to be meeting some discipline. So, and that's the thing, you have to teach your kids discipline, but in an even-handed manner. The phrase I liked when we were raising kids, which I thought I met, my boys might disagree, but that is to be firm but fair. We had a pretty wide perimeter that we let the kids roam in, without a whole lot of correction. They had a pretty wide latitude, but then right at that boundary, if they crossed the boundary, then there was consequences. And I think that that's important. Your kids have to have consequences, and you have to be consistent. That was one of the things that we really practiced, was consistency. And if you say you're going to do something, like if you say, if you do that one more time, then you're going to get punished. If they do it again and you don't punish them, then they know that they're in charge. At that point, they know they can do whatever they want. You're not ever going to do anything. The kids are running the household, and you're off the cliff there. Sorry, Mr. Erickson. You're down the slippery slope of disobedient chaos. So, but at the same time, your rules have to be reasonable. Like, you can't just say, your rules, if they're reasonable and rational, the kids will go along with it. Kids need structure. And they need to know that there are rules, and that's part of the cocoon that swaddles them until they can pupate into adulthood. Sorry for mixing my metaphors there. I had another point, and I skipped ahead, and so I forgot where I was going. Sorry about that. I know what I was going to talk about. Actually, because this is another opportunity for me to get on my soapbox about cell phones and talk about that. One of the things that we shared when we talked about mental health is the fact, and I think fact is the right way to say it. Certainly, the accurate assessment by lots of studies of psychology. No child under the age of 14 should have access to a cell phone. They are not equipped with the filters to keep the bad stuff out, or to have things in proportion. The studies show that the spike in self-harm that young teenagers, even pre-teenagers, are going through is largely generated by the cell phone, the social media phenomenon. Recognize, and I think it's important to talk about again, that social media platforms all have teams of psychologists and psychiatrists and marketing people whose entire goal is to get people to stay fixated on the screens that they are generating. So it's a terrible idea for kids to have access to that, because they don't have the wherewithal to to defend themselves against that social media infiltration of their inner being. And it also deprives kids of, it's the substitution effect is what is the short-term way for it. Right? If you're spending an hour a day looking at TikTok or Facebook or YouTube, this show being the one exception, then then that's time you're not spending playing ball or interacting with your friends or doing the other things that are critically important to developing a well-rounded and normal, and yes, normal personality.
I want to throw something in if I could.
Of course.
So I don't know. I think an area that Alan and I might have more separation on than most is use of, technology and cell phones and social media. But on this, when it comes to kids and young people, this is crucially important. And I think it's beyond the realm of opinion on it. I think all of us know adults that their mental health is severely diminished by negativity on social media. And I say that as like a big part of my job is like being aware of and inundated with AFA social media all day, all the time. I get that. But it's hard when you deal with, and when we're talking about adults on here, we talk about doom porn or doom spiraling, to where we just focus on all the political problems and all the variety of problems that are legitimate, but they're magnified and in your face and inflicted upon you when you're on social media. If we see, people in their 30s that are greatly hurt by social media criticism of them or the way they look or things they're doing or a stance they take, and it's dehumanizing. If we know that badly affects people in their 30s, how much more so someone who doesn't have the common sense to understand. A lot of that's bots. That's not necessarily reflective of regular people. This guy's in his mom's basement, and not like they don't know all the things that we know that mitigate some of the harm. What they know is there's a million voices telling them that they're horrible. And that's awful, especially to our girls. Especially it hits young girls and teenage girls, but even, like preteens, very, very hard when they're aware of that. Peer pressure is a real thing, and it's very relevant throughout our lives, but it's never more intense than that, like junior high age. If you can spare your children that, by all means, do the best you can. And I think that, again, I don't think that you can shelter them from that forever. But one of the things that we saw during all the COVID lockdowns that afflicted, so many of us, we have a generation of people, and it's funny because, to myself, maybe more so to Alan, the passage of time is really different. 2 years of obnoxiousness later in life, when you are in a relationship, when you have a family, when you have those things figured out, is bad enough, and it's really detrimental. But when you're first developing your social skills, you're in high school, you're in that age group, you're trying to make friends, you're trying to pursue sports, you're trying to learn how to talk to girls, or vice versa if you're a female, and you're trying to navigate those things. We've seen how delayed and damaged we have generations of people in their early 20s and mid 20s that are socially retarded. And I don't use that as a pejorative, but just literally they are slowed and developmentally delayed socially because they didn't get that interaction. They didn't learn how to interact in a emotionally responsible way with other human beings. And that, there's probably plenty of people in their early 20s that feel that watching this show right now. That's older kids. How much more so younger kids on that? Learning how to interact with other human beings in the real world is a very essential life skill, and it has been since the dawn of mammalian life. That should not be foregone for modern convenience until you've at least developed the basic skills to incorporate that. And I think that if it's relevant to technology, and Alan and I are both saying it, I think everybody's probably well served there's something to it.
Yeah, and I appreciate you taking that spot with me because it's tough. Your kids are going to beg and whine to get that latest technology, maybe. On the other hand, if you've got them busy doing stuff and they have a well-rounded life where they don't need to absorb themselves into screen time, then they won't miss it as much. The substitution effect is a very real thing. If you keep them busy, and even then there's a balance, right? Because one of the things that psychologists suggest is that we overparent our children. And part of that is because we're trying to make up for the fact that we're not around enough. We overstructure their time, and set them up with play dates, which is just, like in my neighborhood when I was growing up, and I realized that, this was like in the 13th century or whatever. But if we wanted to go play with somebody, we just go knock on their door, right? Hey, can Bart come out and play? Yeah. Okay. No, he's over at Mark's house. So we go over there, and then we'd go down to the school and play baseball or whatever. So, whereas now it's, you want to go play soccer or not? I don't have soccer today. Like everything is so structured and so over scheduled. I realize there's a balance in there. You don't want to just let them freewheel all the time. You gotta, you have to have some a little bit of structure time and then some downtime, and they got to do that busy work. I mean, homework. It's critically important that I actually do think that you should do memorization work, because if you don't know facts, like how can you structure a rational worldview if you don't know, like in the timeline, like when was the Battle of Hastings versus, whatever came after that. Anyway, so
a lot of things came after that. I was going to say, it's been a lot that happened in the last 1,000 years.
Yeah, a couple of things happened, and then Steve McNally came along, and the world began to put itself right. Along that line, though, and one of the big reasons I think that, that we need to have good, strong children with good, strong personalities is that we are in the minority so much of the time. Now, recent events have directed us, are starting to wake people up to the fact that our worldview is the right worldview. And so the world is awakening. Western Europe is awake. Western civilization is reawakening to the idea that maybe all this multiculturalism is not such a great idea. But in the meantime, like your kids are going to catch a lot of flack about wearing a hammer. So they have to be strong within themselves, and they have to be resilient. And the way that you do that is, you let them bounce off the floor occasionally. We went to the emergency room 12 or 15 times. I know we had 6 or 8 broken arms between the 3 kids and a broken collarbone, never a broken leg. Several stitches, but it just comes with the territory. They bounce up and they're okay, right? And that's what scars make good stories. I don't have any, but like my oldest boy's got a plate right here in his collarbone, and he did finally tell me the real story about what happened. He didn't just fall off the skateboard. When he was 16, his 17-year-old buddy was driving him down, and he was holding on. They were, what do you call it? Slaloming with the skateboard, So
where he was grabbing on the back of the tailgate.
Yeah, well, with a rope. It was with the tow rope.
Oh, okay. That's a terrible idea.
Yeah.
As he probably now knows.
He certainly learned it after his second day in the emergency room. But that was, but again, you live and learn, right? And that's something that I think the children of a lot of the hovering parents, like every time the kid hits their butt a little bit, they come sweeping over there. I've been around that too. It's agonizing to watch parents hover like that, because because then the kid grows up thinking of themselves as fragile. And your kids are not fragile. They'll bounce up and do well.
So I think I would like to interject.
Good stars make good stories.
They do, and I want to interject on that for a second. There's something that happens, and I think we've all seen this with like a toddler, like a real little kid. They look to the adults in the room to gauge how to react. There are like crushing injuries that are an immediate pain screaming out, And then there's I fell down.
Right.
And then you see. And if you've got, the hysterical, oh my God, my baby, then the
Right.
crying and the drama ensues. But if you see dad over there like, you all right? Okay, come here. That was cool. Often there's not a problem. They take those early cues on, and it's a couple of different things. Yes, it's obnoxious if your kid is a crybaby all the time. That is annoying to the rest of us. It's whatever, and you want tough kids, but it's not just about that. A lot of it's about self-confidence, and it's about them feeling like they can try things, and if they fall, they can dust themselves off and try again, and that's encouraged and celebrated, that it's okay to get banged around a little bit in the course of life, and it's not a crisis. It's not the end of the world. It teaches a lot of those little things psychologically that kind of build how you react to stuff. And I think that comes into play throughout life a little bit later. And I will gladly take a back seat on a lot of this conversation. My daughter is 5, so I can't, judge I can't judge the fruits of how whatever I'm doing is gonna pay off or not. I've got 5 years worth of stuff that I can talk about, and some theories and things that I see with other children in the AFA and children I come in contact with. But that's something that I think is very important. The other thing that I wanted to mention about the overprotectiveness, and I think this comes in, but like with the world around us in general and other things, and I don't think there's a perfect answer to this. This is an art, but you don't want reality to hit them in the face, perhaps literally, all at once with no preparation when they're outside of your ability to help them navigate it. To do that would be irresponsible. If they don't get to learn how to problem solve and learn something of the world around them, and they have to figure it out all at once, hey, I'm in the deep end, sink or swim, the consequences of sinking are very real, and we see them around us a lot. So that's something that is important to keep in mind.
And that's some of the stuff where those who study and look at this stuff professionally can cast what we see, just in general, and they can categorize it and denominate it. But and that's what you see with both unstructured play and other things that are taken away if you spend too much time on social media and too much time on your cell phone. But and it's exactly what you're talking about, Matt. What are the examples that they use? And I would never have thought about this, but it's like they call it turn taking, right? Like when you're playing with kids, like you don't get the ball all the time, and so you have to learn. They get a turn, I get a turn. That's not something that you learn when you're scrolling or online gaming, because it's always your turn, right? And so then when you come out into the cold, cruel world where it's not always your turn, then you don't have those psychological strength to endure for a lot of people can get knocked down by what seems like some pretty minor stuff. And I think it's because they haven't been, haven't developed those calluses that you get from going around and playing pickup baseball.
And I don't think you need to set them up for failures in order for them to learn, what that's like. I think life provides plenty of that in a measured and appropriate way. But something.
You don't pull the swing out from under them when they're going to sit down, but you also don't.
Well, okay, so I really appreciate there was this other dad at Costco. I was walking with Aubrey, pushing the cart and doing stuff. She wasn't looking where she was going ever. And I told her like 5, 6, an obnoxious amount of time, hey, Aubrey, you need to look where you're going. You need to look where you're going. You need to look where you're going. She was walking right towards this other dude's cart. And he looked at me. This other dad looked at me and I looked at him and we gave each other the nod. She just walked right into it. Not enough to like hurt herself, but I told you need to watch where you're going. Those things, it's important to learn those. But something else I wanted to say that I think is often misunderstood. When we're adults and we're angry with another man, it's like, hey, why don't you say that to my face? Bet you wouldn't say that to my face. It's easy to see the very obvious implication of if you push too hard, maybe someone will hit you. But I think there's a much bigger lesson in that on why people wouldn't say that to somebody's face. And this goes to the idea of the socialization we talked about. Interacting with other people and learning that they have feelings and developing empathy matters. You don't like it when people say mean things to you. It hurts your feelings. Well, when you say mean things to other people and you look at them and you see that you've hurt their feelings, you feel that empathy and you start understanding, I don't like how it feels to look at my friend who now is sad because of something I said. And you learn how to be sympathetic to other people that way by seeing their reaction. And that goes for everything. Like you look somebody in the face and you say something really dumb, you realize like that guy's looking at you like you're crazy, and you hear how it's said when you said it out loud, and you learn a valuable lesson about like, oh, okay, now it makes sense. Well, if you're, an anonymous face behind a screen with some kind of comic book avatar, you don't get that response. You don't get that feedback to inform your social interaction. And
that's important. Both, you don't get either side of it. You don't don't get checked by the obvious hurt that you feel that you've caused, and you don't get checked by the threat of a bloody nose.
Yeah, all of the above. Or you those navigations, and again, you want to learn that on the playground. You don't want to learn that in a back alley in a strange town. You don't know where you're at, but all of a sudden you're 18 and your car broke down and you're somewhere strange. That's not the time to learn that lesson.
Right. That's where stranger danger is a real thing. It's tough, and it's getting harder. I have said before that I'm really happy that we got our kids out right before cell phones came along. I mean, my 2012 or so was, the first time our kids were running cell phones. It immediately turned into a problem. And I get it, you want, and it's, but you as a interim solution, I know like one of the objections that I read about, like, well, I got to be able to get in touch with them. First of all, you don't. Like again, like when I was growing up, before electricity, it was that thing where, when it got dark, we came home, or, if supper was ready before that, mom would come out and call us and we'd go home from where we were usually pretty quickly. But, if you feel like you're so used now to being able to have at least a feeling of that constant tether in your hand. I mean, your kids can have a dumb phone. They still make them where, they can text, I'm over at Mark's house. We're going to play Clue or whatever. Um, it's so they can have a phone where they can call if something really does happen, and if there's an emergency, they can get in touch. That makes sense. I wouldn't decry that, but to have to have the one-eyed idiot maker in their hand all the time, where so much of their soul is being absorbed by the nefarious forces that lurk behind the screen, is just a terrible, terrible idea. I think I wish we could get back to that ideal of like-minded parents all being in the same neighborhood, raising their kids the same way. I think that's a lot of how I grew up.
So
looking back on it,
we can. It is much less convenient now than people like to. It used to be, and this approaches a meta narrative that's important. There was a time where in white parts of America, the families in the neighborhood all had commonality. And when I say that, I'm not just disparaging, but in minority communities, those people all had a shared understanding of reality too. That was different. And your values were likely very similar to most of the people's values on your street and in your neighborhood. Other parents were looking out for each other's children. And I don't mean to paint a grim hellscape of every neighborhood in America. That's not the case. But it is the case in a lot of them. And not necessarily where there's predators and evil intentioned people, but there's a whole lot of ambivalence. There's a whole lot of not my kids, not my problem. There's a lot of things. There's all of the big fears that we're all scared of. The child murderers and child rapists, and those things are terrifying. But there's also people that just have been conditioned socially not to take responsibility for other people's children, not to say anything when kids are doing stuff if they're not their kids, because that's impolite. There's a time where you're walking around the neighborhood and you do something wrong. Somebody else's mom comes out there and scolds you and says, "Hey, you want me to call your mom? Like, I saw you. You have a whole neighborhood of eyes making sure the kids are safe." That's not always the case. I will say this is really cool. And this was, probably 10 years ago, but it was still pretty cool because I thought this disappeared. It's funny. Alan talks about, when he was a kid and when I was a kid, a little while later, it was still the same way that you could do that. It amazes me because I couldn't imagine Aubrey doing that. But it's summertime, it's in the morning, you get done with your cereal or whatever else you do, and you go outside and you go play with your friends. You come back around lunchtime, and then you come back when it starts getting dark. And there was, never a care in the world. All the kids were cool. They were over at somebody's house or at so-and-so's house. It wasn't a scary thing. We had, when I got a bicycle, there was a bigger, I guess, zone where I could stay in a bunch of the neighborhood streets, but I didn't get to cross these major streets. But again, it was a couple miles radius that I could be on my bike without it being a problem. Don't always have that, but I went to a friend of mine's house, former AFA member in Oklahoma, and his daughter was out playing in the neighborhood, and it's like I'd traveled back in time. It's like I traveled back in time, 30 plus years previous, to where he went to his front door, opened the door, hollered his kid's name, and 5 houses down or whatever, a whole mess of kids comes running out of a house, and all those kids come and swarm him and get in his house or whatever. And that was that. And it's hard to have that now. So the bigger meta narrative I was going to say is, because this goes into some stuff, and we got some questions. I'll certainly kick it back to you here in a second. But one of the things that came up, we'll get to it more specifically. It's a little bit more nuanced than that. But we can, and some of us are very much trying to move into communities together. If you can get houses on the same street, awesome. If you can get a shared piece of property, that's cool. But you know what else is cool? If that's not the world you live in and you live in an urban environment, hey, if you got 4 or 5 different AFA members in the same apartment building or in the same, apartment complex or whatever, there's a lot of ways to do it, but proximity to other families with shared values is really important. And it's harder to find because we've become very atomized. But I would say those of us in the Asatru Folk Assembly have a much better chance for that than most people around us. We have access in the AFA to hundreds of other parents and families with children that share our worldview, that understand the dangers that we understand, and that are invested in trying to take care of each other. The more we move to closer together, the better that gets. Maybe it's not the idyllic, us old guys talking about, our childhood last century, but it's a lot closer than if you don't have it and you have other people's houses they can go to and other kids that can reinforce and draw strength from your children and be a strength for each other. So that's something that we're very consciously trying to do. It's why my family's moving to Jackson County, Tennessee, to Sigerheim, to make that a thing and to move with other AFA families there to build that in a small county and try to get a piece of that in our life. It's very seldom going to come and find you, but if you are committed to building that, you have a lot of agency to build the life that you want for yourself and your family if you're willing to pick up stakes and move somewhere and put down roots and make those efforts. It's not always going to be easy, but in the AFA, you have a lot of options to help with that. And it kind of flows into tonight's earlier announcement about Freyshoff. The more we get Hoff's places, those can serve as spots for people to move closer to and build community around. We've got beachheads in the wolf age around us of little pockets of golden age that we can all take shelter in. And that's a beautiful thing that we have that generations previous didn't. And I'd encourage everybody to take part in that.
So 2 things, there is an AFA parenting group online, right? So I would certainly encourage those parents that to gather around that, because, that is that kind of thing where it looks like the whole rest of the world is in chaos and we're the only ones doing it right. And that's, there are a lot of traditionalist families that do these same things that we're doing, but it's good to have that feedback among the adults on shared social space, the interwebs or whatever, to get that sort of encouragement and good feedback that, yes, we are doing it the correct way. The other thing, because we AFA members are spread so thin for right now, it is absolutely okay to get that network through other traditionalist type groups. You meet some dads at the gun club, or you meet some moms at Girl Scouts, and you do those sorts of things, and you can meet parents who have the same traditionalist values that we do, and their kids will be good kids, and their kids will be raised in a respectful, raised right. That's how we say it in the South, raised right. And they will be good kids and be good company for your kids and help buffer that chaotic, normie world of NPCs out there.
Absolutely. Do you have more on your agenda, or would you like to take some questions?
Let's take some questions. I can wax on and often do,
Well,
but
parenting, that's like a daily thing that occurs for I say for 18 years, but I imagine it occurs
30,
perpetually as long as
yes.
both parties are on this side of the veil. So I'm going to try to sort through this question. This question was an optional VNS question and a personal email, so it's not formatted the way we are used to. So I'm going to try to navigate it the best I can. Any fault is mine and not the original senders. So today, for the first time, I poured out a little coffee and prayed to Odin, asking for protection and wisdom. Anyhow, I'm still on the fence about Asatru, but my mind was just flooded with an interesting thought. Is it possible that the Asatru movement might become instrumental in reconciling Black and white folks in North America? For example, I found a Black nationalist preacher before I ever found Asatru. This man had left Christianity and begun to worship the ancient African gods. I emailed him asking where a white post-Christian should go for spirituality. He never responded. It became apparent over time that this Black nationalist preacher had genocidal feelings towards whites. But I wonder if we, Asatru folk, could get the message out that as white Christians, that it was white Christians who enslaved Blacks, and that white Asatru folks have no desire to subjugate other races. Perhaps we could help change their minds of genocidal Black folks. If we could communicate that we reject monotheism and reject the idea that one God is supreme over all, if we recognize that all folk have their own legitimate gods, we can encourage our Black neighbors to worship their gods whilst we worship ours. We can appreciate the differences between Black and white folks. We can perhaps live together in peace. I wouldn't approach Black Christian leaders with any desire to try and cooperate, but I wonder if any Asatru leaders might be willing to build bridges with Black nationalists in the spirit of reconciliation and cooperation. One reason I haven't fully committed to Asatru is because I'm not sure if it leads to peace or war. I am a man of peace, although I do recognize that there is a time for war as well. Anyhow, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this. Now, it's a big question. There's a lot there to unpack. There are some things that are incongruent with our stance, and there are some things that are good points to think about in that. Alan, what is your reaction to that in whole or in part?
Well, I will, I understand the tenor of the question, and it certainly has been discussed that that those who recognize distinction, and that's the way I'd like to, those who recognize the distinction among peoples can have a more comfortable conversation, because we don't suffer from the mythology that everybody's the same. Okay, that there are differences between and among peoples, and that's okay. They're East. What was it? One of the Keats poems. East is east and west is west, and never the twain shall meet. No, Nick's looking that up already. But we have our, and I just want to get to a point, and this is one of the reasons why I try to encourage us to group together. I want to get to a point where I don't have to think about, I don't care what other people think or how they act. We have a unique approach to civilization, what It means to have a happy, healthy child in a Western civilizational context has a particular meaning, and that's the way that we were shaped for hundreds of thousands of years, and it is valid and worthy of protection. Those who have been shaped by different culture, I'm sure they feel the exact same way, and as they rightly should, that their culture also is valid and worthy of protection. Where these lines start to blend and cross, the type of equality and egalitarianism that we see that's being foisted on us by the Frankfurt School, by modern culture, only can meet down at the lowest common denominator. And that is, the devolution of all of our civilizations, where the lowest appetites are the things that we can agree on. And so that's what has been foisted to the front of the line. Modern music, I'm not going to do the air quotes, but what passes for modern music and all, is just crap. And it's because it's all algorithmed out to our basest nature. And our approach to these sorts of things should be to rise above that. As Western man, we are burdened and blessed by the Faustian urge to rise above our circumstances. That's how we got electricity and refrigeration and internal combustion. All the blessings of modern civilization. And I do agree that we can agree to disagree, that we can live adjacent but not adjoining, if that's the right way to phrase that. And I think I'm getting at sort of the gist of the question.
So Yar, and this is kind of so I responded to the email privately, and the tone of the question seems to make it like, if only we were nice and sweet talked the blacks, they wouldn't be so, like, literally the question posits genocidal towards us. If only we could teach them that, no, it was the Christian whites that enslaved you guys, not Ásatrú whites. I think that starting position in relations is a non-starter, and I think it goes to the bigger thing. You don't want to treat with other people or other groups of people out of weakness, but also what's in the question inherently that I like is treating with other people both from a position of strength. I think that whatever we think the ideal situation is, we live, certainly here in the United States, in a very multicultural society with all different races of people intermixed into our communities in a variety of ways. Some of us want that. Some of us do not want that. Some of the folks on other groups of people also might not want that to be the case, but here we are. We interact with each other in a variety of ways under a variety of different circumstances. But historically, we interact with one another under the terms of universalist faiths that deny our individuality, that's blatantly obvious to all of us, but we have to pretend it's not. And one side is the victim and the other side is the inflictor of oppression, or that's how the narrative is laid out. And it fundamentally pits us in a conflict that doesn't have to be necessary. What I'm reminded of, and if you read the tone of that question, yes, it sounds very lovey-dovey or soft or whatever, But the immediate thing that came to mind was Commander Rockwell going with other members of the American Nazi Party to go meet with and attend a Nation of Islam sermon by Malcolm X in 1961. Two folks that you would think would be extreme enemies, but they could come together with a certain amount of mutual respect because they both were very proud of their people and both had similar values expressed in different cultures towards their own versus their own's interaction with the rest of the world. And both of them came from positions of strength. It wasn't, any, I don't know, historical disavowing of ancestors or anything else. So I do think that having pride in ourselves and our race and our folk is the best place to be to have productive relationships with any other group of people we interact with. And I would say the same for other races of people. Certainly it's up to them how they want to present themselves. I would much rather a proud, unabashed, racially proud white man and his Black counterpart and his Chinese counterpart and his Aztec counterpart be able to have respect for one another and pride in their own individual cultures than this unnatural pretending we're all the same. Everybody's, boo-hooing about them being victimized stuff. Right. I think that the strong position is a much safer and more peaceful position than the weak position, which is kind of an interesting thing. The more I mulled this over, he talks at the end about he's concerned about being Ásatrú because he doesn't know whether it leads to war or it leads to peace. And, the best way to achieve peace is to be prepared for war. The best way to maintain the peace is by strong people knowing that there are lines that you don't cross, having respect for that, and that being a mutual respect of strong people. Because when you have weak people that react out of weakness, that's when you have violence. That's when you have pettiness. That's when you have ugliness. You don't have that nearly as much with two strong individuals or two strong groups that both are able to have pride in themselves. And I think that's the meat and taters of the question and where I think it's valuable for us to consider.
And I agree with that for the most part. Not the best example maybe, but at the same time, I think we should disabuse this questioner of any naivete about the history of our people. Yes, I guess we should, maybe we should remind everyone. I know the vast majority of our listening audience already knows this, but slavery didn't start in 1619, right? If you want to know about the true horrors of the slave trade, read about the Muslim slave trade.
The current Muslim slave trade.
Right. That's what I mean. The millions of whites that they kidnapped from Europe and took into Muslim lands. And sometimes the Vikings were helping them do it. I mean, it brought in big sacks of silver, so they would go in and capture some Irish and sell them. So, we shouldn't pretend, even to win one more follower, we shouldn't pretend that somehow our like the hammer of Thor wasn't out there taking slaves, because we did. The Vikings themselves had slaves from other white cultures that they captured in war. That was part of the big bounty of war, is, and that's one of the reasons why people fought so hard to keep from being overwhelmed is because they knew like the men would be taken into slavery and the women would be taken into concubinage, right? So, I mean, when you know that's what's coming, you know that motivates your battle courage throughout history. Like and I'm reading a book intermittently called War and Civilization, and like all this mythology about the Native American tribes being these peacefully coexisting. That's all just bullshit.
Not once, not ever.
You know, they talk about like even the Eskimos, but even as thinly populated as that part of the world is, they have blood grudges that go back decades, and they will kill each other over, you came and took my walrus tooth or whatever. So,
yeah, no, it's an endless cycle of supposed victimization. Even the American slave trade was much less like white guys going into Africa and rounding up natives. It was a lot of African tribes selling us their slaves and us purchasing them to get used in an environment that is not well suited to us toiling in.
And the Native Americans took they enslaved,
American blacks, when they were emancipated, when they got enough money, the first thing they wanted to get was their own slaves. And I'm not saying that, I'm just saying that as a matter of fact. People throughout all of Earth's history take slaves. That happens a lot, but there's one group of people that for the last however long, at least 50 years, if not more, we constantly need to go through that with is this same thing that again is present in the question, is like apologizing for slavery. No, I have no desire to whatsoever. I don't disavow my ancestors that I'm very proud of. They were successful. The other thing is, it's funny because people co-opt that onto them. A lot of the people who are suggesting that in America are people who their ancestors didn't come here until real recently. They may very well have ancestors that sold those slaves to early American colonists. So a lot of that, if we want to go back in hundreds of years ago to pick out grievances, any of us could have a list a mile long at any given time because we live, 5,000 years into written history. What's important is yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And I think that's only addressed through a very strong, proactive, assertive pride in oneself and unrelenting commitment to the well-being of your folk, whatever your folk might, whatever hue your folk might be. The way to be is strong and committed to the well-being of your people against any outside threat. And if all parties felt that way, we would have a much safer world and a much safer society.
The shorthand way that I like to phrase that is when it's us versus them, I take us every time.
Always.
And
peace through strength.
Exactly. And I've watched a lot of Jonathan Bowden's videos out there. There's a lot of his stuff out there on the internet, YouTube. And the phrase that he used is you just step over it. Yes, we did that stuff. We killed people. We enslaved people. We were killed and we were enslaved in turn. So yeah, that stuff happened. You step over it. Just because, like, if your grandfather stole 50 cents from my grandfather, you don't owe me 50 cents. If we want to go back to that, I want to go find the Normans and, because they still owe me reparations back from 1066. So it's, talk about some get back. But we have to take ourselves today at face value. How do we start today and make a better life for ourselves and for our children? And the way we do that is by facing the past honestly. You know, the Vikings were not peaceful people. The Saxons were not peaceful. They didn't beg the Britons, or they didn't politely ask the Romans to leave Britain. They killed them until they quit coming back.
There's a lot of ways to do things, and I get we live in the time that we live in, and I think that for all of us, peace is awesome. We want peace, but peace isn't like an unlimited good. We want peace on favorable terms. Like if we're able to have the things that we want, the things that we need, and the destiny that we want to shape for ourselves, then we don't want unnecessary war or hardship. Everyone should want that. And if we all want that and are committed with our blood and bone to that, then we can have some reasonable compromise instead of a back and forth victimization process.
Right. That's as you're saying that, I'm thinking peace, yes, but at what cost?
Yeah, peace is awesome, but it's not
unlimited.
There are limits. It is not the only thing that's important, and I think that we get everything doesn't need to be expressed in the most extreme terms, and we very often are there as if war just happens just cause, or peace just happens just cause, and it doesn't. There's a lot of factors that are very legitimate in conflict between peoples and groups of people, and there are various solutions that are peaceful and respectful to both sides. There are various solutions that are not, and different times call for different ways to address situations. But that was that man's question, and I hope it made sense. I do think that, and to extend more on the Black nationalist thing, there was a time where the thought was, let's take care of our own, let's protect our own, and let's elevate our people to something better and something higher. That is a really noble thing for all groups of people to try to do for their people. And as a point of kind of to put a bookend on it, it's been nice when we have the blue-haired, college-educated, liberal Karens of the world complaining about how terrible we are. People that have come out in support of us have been a number of members of the Nation of Islam to say, like, hey, you guys trying to look out for your people and take care of your own, I respect that. Assalamu alaikum. I appreciate that. Thank you. So yeah, I do think that there's something there, just maybe not in the way that the questioner envisioned. Next question. Hey there. When talking to some people about the lore, they sometimes like to point to stories where the Aesir mixed and reproduced with the Vanir and the Jotuns as examples to try to prove that race mixing is approved by the gods. There's also some saga about an individual named Geirmund Hellskin, who evidently had dark skin and is seen as a mixed race individual who is spoken well of. What would the AFA say about these claims regarding mixing? Thank you and much love to the AFA. The guy's name is Geirmund Heljarskin, and he was a Norwegian prince that married a Sami, I think. So, Alan, what are your thoughts on that question?
I think, like at least, first of all, I'm having to look up who, and he has a Wikipedia page. I have my.
Don't reveal. See, you're giving the magic tricks away. I'd never heard of this guy either. I had to Google it too. I just kept it off screen.
I think that the thing between the Aesir and the Vanir, first of all, they were closely compatible, as was shown by the fact that, they came to war, but, were evenly matched. So I don't think that that sort of thing is about race mixing so much as it is the intertribal warfare that you might see, like between the Ostrogoths and the Goths and Ostrogoths. I mean, those were two different peoples too. I think the problem writ large in the lore is the example that is often spoken of by our more, by those who want to use the example of Loki as that he was blood brother to the gods and all that, which I don't think is attested to correctly in the lore. I think there's a different way to interpret all that stuff, but how did that turn out? That's the question. Yes, Odin brought Loki in, the son of giants, which were, probably of some different, slightly different composition, and that turned out very poorly for the gods. The other thing to say, and you're the lore guy, right? So I don't want to step all over your stuff, but like, to me, I don't think of like the way that the giants and like all that sort of stuff, that's not literal happening. That's a mythological understanding of the world. What exactly that is has a lot less bearing for me than being able to come up to Freyshoff for the inaugural ceremony here pretty soon.
So there's first, before we do any of that, got a comment over in the comment section from Jay Russ. Not a member, don't agree with folkishness, still donate cash because I approve of how the AFA puts our gods first. Thank you very much for that. Very much appreciated. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're listening, and I appreciate your contribution. To the point. So the sagas are historical accounts of things that happen.
Yeah, the sagas.
Yes, sometimes we get pieces out of them that do reflect values, but some guy mated with a Sami back in early medieval Norway isn't indicative of that is, celebrated by the, religious elites of Asatru at all. Things happen. The sagas talk about murders and kinslaying that happens, and any number of bad things that happen are illustrated in there too. They weren't necessarily written for moral purposes as much as documenting events that occurred. And you can talk about how characters are treated in them to express attitudes of the time, but to show, man, in reading all of the saga material, I found one instance of one guy that went and got it on with the Sami. So clearly, the 10th noble.
All the rest of this attitude is wrong.
Yeah, the 10th noble virtue should clearly be miscegenation. That's not reasonable. It doesn't make any kind of logic or sense. It's also important to realize the world that our ancestors lived in and the differences between things. Until relatively recently in the progress of humanity, there was a real clear understanding of mankind equals white folks. And everybody else, we know they exist, but it's not really the same thing we're talking about. And you can read that up into the Declaration of Independence and, the Constitution and the writing of the Founding Fathers. They were very egalitarian amongst white people. But when you talk, we believe that all men are created equal. And Thomas Jefferson was a genius by all accounts, a very lettered man, someone who spoke fluent French, Greek, Latin, I believe, and English, and was literate in German, like a top-notch mind. It wasn't lost on him the seeming incongruence of he was a slave owner and he wrote that all men are created equal. Clearly, he didn't think that meant that American Indians or blacks were the same and equal to whites. He meant kind of that all white people were created equal. And then the rest is a little bit nuanced. There's a understanding of same and different that transcends. We read when Svan and I go through saga material, they talk about the race of the, Hundings, or the race of the Burgundians, or the race of the Goths, as if they're different things. They're talking about ethnic differences between Germanic tribes and European peoples. They talk really differently the few times we see them encounter other races of people in the term that we would understand the word race to mean today. When they encountered American Indians, they talked about Skraelings, and their description wasn't like, oh, these are just like the Irish or the French. No, they were a very different thing. And I think that's the obvious assumption and the obvious thing that's conveyed by any fair historical treatment. The sagas and the lore are thick with in-group preference. Yes, people that are similar to you are much more important to you than people that are not similar to you. Yes, we need to be very respectful of us, and them less so. And them it extends out to various circles until you're very far away from what us is.
And you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And if you read the accounts of the Romans who encountered the Germanic tribes, one of the things that they point out is that, like, couples could not marry across tribal lines. Like an Atlantic tribesman couldn't go find a wife over there in the Cherokee, because there were these broad lines of separations even among those tribal peoples. There's also and something even better documented is the way that the Native Americans, that's not the right word, the Indian tribes that were here on North America when we discovered the continent, the name that they typically had for themselves just meant human beings. Like the Cherokee, each tribe, we are the people, and those other people on the other side of the hill over there, they're not people. They're the non-people. And so these sharp lines of division have always existed between and among people. And it's only
if it was cool, why would you remark on hellskin? Like, that's the thing. If it was cool, we wouldn't have strange terms for mulatto Bob over there. It wouldn't be remarkable. The fact that it's remarkable means that was not ordinary, and that was a odd thing.
And it could, and it could, his skin could be two shades darker than the other. He could be ecru instead of parchment, and they would have thought of him as dark skinned. So it's so what exactly that means?
Yeah, no, we have people that try to reinvent history in a very disingenuous way. You can think that all of a sudden you and your cult of social justice wokeness, you guys are the only ones who've ever known the right way to do things, and you discovered it in 2015 and everybody else has been confused. If that's what you believe, then have the intellectual courage to stand on that. Don't co-opt the rest of Western civilization to pretend that was always the case, because it wasn't. And there's nothing in the lore that says that. The other thing I'll say a little bit about the lore and the Aesir versus the Vanir or the Jotnar. Similar to what Alan was saying, that's not about like different races of people. That is about cosmic and fundamental gods that exist in a way that we can't fully comprehend. So we describe them in terms that make sense, like tribes of people, because they were different groupings of great celestial cosmic god forces interacting. There was cosmic order and natural law gods interacting with one another in a way, and there were primal beings of metaphysical existence with the Jotnar, some inclined to destruction and chaos, others unconscious, others just kind of neutral in things. Talking about bigger cosmic forces in an overly personified way is a way that's still useful for us today to wrap our human heads around things that exist in a much bigger way than we fully can comprehend. And so we draw pictures on what we're used to. It's important to remember that our ancestors didn't live in a world where they encountered any of these other people. It was very rare that somebody would travel far enough to where they see a different race of person. You saw some different varieties of white people. You saw probably your entire life, you only saw Nordic people. But maybe you saw an Irish slave. Maybe you went raiding or trading and you saw a Frenchman or a Pole or a German. But these people weren't regularly encountering a Chinaman or a sub-Saharan African. That wasn't part of their experience, and it had no relationship to how they conceptualized their lore. It just wasn't a part of what they dealt with. And I think that any fair looking at history, the in-group preference there is the norm and a very, very easily understandable thing. So I don't think that's a hard one. And I don't think the one asking the question thought it was. I think he was just, wanted our reaction to it. Next up, greetings, All's Harrier Gothi Matt, Lawspeaker Allen, and Folk Builder Nick. What is the Faustian bargain, and how is it related to our people? I've heard it used occasionally. Thank you for all you do. You're welcome. Alan, do you want to explain the concept of the Faustian bargain?
Sure. I'll take a stab at it since I was the one who brought it into the conversation. We are restless. That's the Faustian bargain, as I understand it. We are a restless people, right? That's why we go out and conquer and explore, and we always want to know what's over the next horizon. We're not settled. We are restless, and I think it's referred to. Again, my understanding, I think it's referred to as the Faustian bargain because, in some ways, it's a good thing. Right? Because of our restlessness, we found our way to North America and all of its bounty and its island continental protectorate that has been such a boon to all of the American peoples. And it's taught us, we've dug into how things work. That's how we discovered electricity, and all, for all the good and ill that it has brought. The downside of that is that we are, is that very same restlessness brings about that thing where, we leave our family, right? Like, okay, Pop, you're staying here. I'm going to go west. And then his kids will go west. And, we have to explore. And so we separate our families and do those things because we are always often, we have the urge to make more, make better, expand and strengthen ourselves individually and our civilization at the cost of that idea of being settled and peaceful, and being in that place where, like generations of Flavels can just kind of grow around us because we are all just sitting in the same place, being in the same spot. And that's the downside of that bargain. Yes, it has given us great increase in wealth and empire, but at the cost of being always unsettled in our familial and intertribal relations.
So, yeah, I want to expand on that. I like it and don't like it. And it's something that Cliff and I have talked about recently. Conceptually, I like it. The term takes on unnecessary baggage. So, it's a reference to a play by Goethe, I believe, about Faust. And Faust was a man who literally made a deal with the devil in order to learn secrets, learn secret knowledge, to break mental barriers to accomplish things. And it ties it in with a diabolism, if that's a word, that I don't think expresses what typically is meant when the term's used. So, yes, it is our instinct that's inborn in us as a race to build more, to always push the horizon, to discover, to conquer, to explore, to build more, to run faster, to lift more, to learn more things, to explore space, to explore the depths of medical knowledge or whatever else. We always want to improve and to get more and increase. And I think that it also encapsulates the inherent uneasiness that causes. Because we're never, and I feel some of this intensely, and probably to my wife's chagrin in a lot of ways. I'm never going to be satisfied, and especially in an AFA context. And I think it's one thing that probably makes me a pain in the butt to be around, but I think is beneficial. Is beneficial to us in a bigger way is. Tonight, I am very proud to announce Freyshoff. Don't think for a second that I'm not immediately, like, probably more than is appropriate, focused on exact plans for Tiershoff and then what to do at Bragishoff. And if immediately we had all 14 Hoffs that I have currently planned, okay, cool. But what about the next 25?
Right.
And I don't disavow that, but it is obnoxious, and it is there are costs that come with it. I think that it's instructive to look at the advice specifically put in the mouth of Odin. Now, Odin, we all know that he is the prime example of questing for greater knowledge, greater power, doing these things. Our lore is rich with that. But he advises in the Havamal that it is best for man to be middling wise. And there's a lot of wisdom to that. And it's the question that I ask all of our Gothar students when they start wanting to become a Gothi. You read the warning label. Are you choosing to forego that warning and pursue knowing things that you may not want to know? When you look too deeply into things, you inevitably bear a burden for that. There is a cost to being restless in your exploration of things. It is much easier to float by and not know and just be content, watching TV and, doing whatever you're doing. There's a cost when you want to become a fuller version of your potential, a fuller man or a woman, to rise up to a level of nobility, because there is a burden that comes with knowing what you don't want to know. There is also a responsibility that comes with things, because when you know things, then you have an obligation to act a certain way or not. If you didn't know, you can always it's not my fault. I didn't know any better. Well, what about when you do know better? And that's something to consider. So there is a cost to be paid by that, for that pushing forward of boundaries and becoming more than we are. And I think that is very specific to us as a race. And people have talked about that. And I think that other groupings of Earth fauna probably have different explanations for this in their own context. But from our perspective, we are the group of people that innovates, discovers, creates, does all these things. And we don't see that, certainly not in the same way and not to the same proportion, in other groups of people. And it's something that I'm very proud of about our folk. Do we know when there will be a dedication? This is in reference to those of you just joining us. We have Freyshoff. We have Freyshoff in Austintown, Ohio. There's a beautiful picture of beautiful Freyshoff. Woo! It is amazing. It really is a beautiful building. It's awesome. So yeah, there you have it. Do we know about a dedication? We do. Plan as it is now is the dedication is going to be December the 6th. That is the plan. It is in stone, but it may be a softer stone than granite. I'm not sure. You can ask Whitten Erickson. It is set in stone. Barring any hiccups on the way, I believe that Whitten's Fawn is going to be in the early part of November, painting the mural of Lord Freyr there. And it's an awesome spot. It's not a fixer-upper. It's pretty turnkey in a lot of ways. So we are very, very fortunate with the building that we found and the blessings that we have received. So it exists. It's there. I'm sure if you happened up there, you would have some people eager to show you around, but the official dedication is looking like it's going to be December the 6th. It will certainly be in 2025. So we are very excited. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be amazing. It already is awesome and amazing. And I can't get over how excited I am about it. So indulge me. Specific question I alluded to a little bit earlier in our parenting conversation that comes into play. Oh, so before we get to that, a parenting thing I wanted to mention. Everybody, and I mean everybody, the forces of good and the forces of evil, have definitive ideas about exactly how you should raise your kids in every circumstance. And very often, you either raise your kid exactly like I'm saying, or they are doomed and it's all done and you have failed as a parent. I don't know. I assume that continues throughout childhood to parents. I know that as new parents, Mandy and I encountered that a lot. Don't allow yourself to be beaten down by analysis paralysis on it. There are lots of right ways to do this. There are lots. What's important is navigating away from the wrong ways to do it. There's a lot of right ways to do it. Something that meant a lot. And I don't want to dig too deep in this subject. I will if we get questions or whatever. I know we have members out there that, their kids are fully vaccinated with all the stuff. And we have people that are very hardline, fundamental, anti-vax, don't believe in that. And then we have a lot of people that are somewhere in between on it. I will say, and this isn't preaching at you, this is just our experience as parents. Mandy and I weren't fundamentally anti-vax and would never have described ourselves that way. I think I'm starting to be in a point where I would describe myself that way, but it didn't start there. But we were trying to look into it, and it was scary because we had parents later in life, we had parents very early in life, as a matter of fact. We became parents later in life. We had Aubrey when we were both 39 years old, and you're trying to make the best decision you can, and you have one camp of people telling you any vaccine, your kid's immediately going to be retarded. You're going to ruin your kid's life because of vaccine. And then the other side, no, if you don't get your kids 100% vaccinated with all this stuff, you are a terrible person, and your child might as well just be dead right there because every bad thing's going to happen to them. There's a lot of stress that people get put under. Don't let that do that to you. Make decisions based on what you believe is right, and trust that people have been having children that make it to adulthood that are very successful for thousands and thousands of years, or else we would not be here. You are literally created to be able to do that. We had a lot of people, a lot of influences trying to scare us on a lot of things. I will forever be appreciative of the pediatrician that Aubrey has. So for those of you playing at home, if you're doing the math or whatever, Aubrey's 5. We had her in 2020 in April, during when the COVID madness was hitting its height. I was very scared that I wasn't going to get to be there for her birth, because this was the time that they were starting to not allow that certain places. And I was real worried that they wouldn't let me be there. Fortunately, they did. But our pediatrician, during all of this, he would do all the things he's supposed to do to be medically licensed and whatever else. But we dealt with a lot of people that had a lot of ingrained medical trying to force us to get stuff done. Well, we chose not to get her vaccinated with things. And he would ask because he's obliged to ask. And when we were like, no, thank you, he was fine. And when we expressed fears or concerns or, trying to do it right, I appreciate that he took his mask down and he said, if you guys want to get her vaccinated, she's probably going to be all right. And if you guys don't, she's probably going to be all right. Probably going to be just fine. And that was meaningful. I'm glad that he afforded us that compassionate, letting us make decisions for our child without trying to unduly pressure us on it. It was nice to have that interaction. I know a lot of parents don't get that. There's a lot of right ways to do stuff, and we're all going to make different decisions. What I have seen in Asatru that I don't like, and I don't want for you guys, and I don't want for any of us, is again, a paralysis by analysis, or a abdication of parental responsibility because too hard. You don't want to put up with the complaining or the backlash or the nonsense for things you think. So you just let it ride, and you're like, when they're adults, then we'll be able to talk, and then they can make decisions. They can as your homie, but it's your job to parent them while they're your children. You can be the cool parent, and then you can, spend another 30, 40 years as their friend, but you've got a really important window to be their parent and to indoctrinate them. Ooh, bad word. No, it's not. Indoctrinate them with the things that you believe firmly with your firm, sincere convictions.
That is the right.
Yeah, but here's the thing. Think about it, do the best you can, and have the courage to take on the responsibility of parenting your child. Don't leave that to someone else. Maybe it's a spouse that you're separated from. Maybe it's, stuff your parents want you to do, or stuff, any other person. No, be an active parent to your child when you can. Just please do that, because I think it's really important. And I'll add this next bit on an answer to the question. I'll get to the question here, but it was something I wanted to say earlier that I thought was important. You're going to have parents telling you what the kids can eat. Well, that's too much complex carbohydrates, and there's a lot of people have ideas, and a lot of people mean well. You can do this, and you have the freedom to choose from a wide spectrum of things of how you raise your kids, and you can adjust on the fly, and you can learn as you go. But make sure you're actively engaged and you're doing the best that you know how to with the information available to you. And you can do this. So the question is, how do we raise our kids with white positive values in an anti-white world? We don't want to shelter them too much, but we don't want them to be swayed by the masses either. Alan, what do you say to that?
If I was doing it now and had cooperation, first of all, I would start with raising, with homeschooling the kids, using the Ásatrú Academy screen. I would get, there you go. I would make sure that all your textbooks were written before 1964. Because that's when all the important stuff happened anyway. And, I think it's important if your kids are, now, and homeschooling's not possible for everybody. So if your kids are in government school, as so many of them are, and this is what I did. First of all, I read to my kids a lot. I read lots of classical books to my kids, so they were exposed to, to real literature. And also, I think it's important to talk to kids, especially that, the young tweens, maybe, where they start getting a sense of history and a vector of history. What did you guys talk about in history today? Look at their history book. And when I mean, I know it takes an extra 15 minutes out of your day to interact with your child, but that's the important stuff so that you can put the right gloss on the historical events that led us to where we are.
So I would say first, so this is, I guess, self-serving, or of course I'm going to say this, but the reason for that is the holistic nature of our faith and doing Asatru right. Yes, because I'm all in on the AFA, and I'm all in on the AFA because it's the right thing to do and the right place to be. So yes, I would encourage you as a first step, raise them in the Asatru Folk Assembly. Raise them from day one in troth with the ICER, to where our gods are involved in your parenting, in your relationship, in your marriage, and in your raising of your children from the very outset. Build the best you can a home for them, physically, but importantly, like mentally and spiritually, of a home base to approach the world on that's built around our folk, our faith, our gods, our community, and our values, to where that's what their norm is. And when they go out into the world, they can come back to something that's a place of the world as it should be. Do that, because I think that matters, and I think it resonates, and I think that when people venture far from that, they're able to have those touchstones mentally and emotionally to connect back to things as they should be, and to pass those things on to their children. Try to facilitate them building friendships with other children who are in the AFA. Encourage that and help those relationships grow. If you're able to live in a place where there's other AFA members, do that. If you want to do that, come do that with me in Jackson County, Tennessee. I'd love to be part of helping you do that. But if not, wherever you find yourself, try to do that. The other thing that I would say that's really big is the Ásatrú Academy. I'm so proud that that's a thing. It is legitimate in unaltered. It's legitimate in, I believe, 46 states, with a little bit of tweaking that I believe our staff is now able to help you do. It is effective in all 50, and I'm told in some Canadian provinces. So our international audience, I do the best I can for you, but I don't have all the answers on that because rules differ certain places. But yeah, homeschool your kids if you're able. Understand everybody's not able, and do the best you can.
And if you're not able, we could still get you children's religious materials and lessons.
It's a very good point. So you don't have to be all in. You can do something different and still have the benefit of the religious teachings and other stuff. In the Ásatrú Academy, we rely heavily on the Waldorf curriculum. Waldorf method is something that aligns well with our values, was built for our people and our needs in a really natural way. Again, there's a lot of right ways to do it. That's one that we happen to like and encourage in that. But again, if you're able to, do that. Something else that I'd say, be involved in your kid's life and be the person you either want your kid to become or that you want your kid to marry and build a life with. I think that crosses both genders on whatever. Be that person of the example of the best Aryan man or the best Aryan woman so your kids have something to shoot for and see it displayed in a real way. And I don't mean tell them about it. Of course, you'll tell them about it. But example is so important because example cuts through all of the barriers we have with intellectualism and argumentation and all those things. When they feel a certain way because of what they see you do or how they interact with you, that matters in a way that circumvents argument or resistance and gets internalized and imprinted. Be the example. You don't need to be perfect. None of us are perfect. But be a good person and somebody likable. Don't become the bad guy. Don't fall into the trap of becoming the, evil, mean-spirited person that the forces of chaos would portray you as. Don't do that, because that encourages them to rebel and go the opposite direction. And that is not what you want to do. The more they can have good example in their life, I think the better equipped they are. And the more they have people and a home of people that care about them in a nuclear sense, but also in a community sense, I think that positions them really well. And I encourage you to try to work on all of those steps. And if you're in the AFA, we have a lot of people that are trying to do those exact things at the same time. And as best I can, I want to facilitate those people doing those things together. What else we got? If a white person likes listening to rap music, do they lose their white card? Alan, what say you?
Well, if you're listening to Kneecap, then I think you're okay. Or, dang it. What's the group? Come on, Public Enemy. That's good rap.
Alan is a longtime fan of Flavor Flav.
I am. Boy.
There you go. Things you may not have known.
What time is it?
Flavor Flav is ridiculous. If I had to support one, I'd support Professor Griff, I guess, of that group.
Okay, but speaking of which, you know what? That's funny because if you're drawn to rap, you should check out Professor Elemental.
So,
the gentleman rapper.
All of this to say, we all have thoughts throughout the day. Only so many of those thoughts do we choose to express. If one of your thoughts is how much you enjoy rap music, that's a thought that you might want to direct inward and not outward. If you direct that outward in mixed company, you might well lose your white card.
Or take a punch out of it. Clip a corner off of it.
Yeah.
And once you've had your corner clipped, it's hard to get it all the way back.
Yeah, it'll forever be marred in some way. So some thoughts are best left on the inside. Whitten Allen, where do you get that hammer? That's the nicest skein hammer I've seen.
This hammer? This, when I first found Asatru back in in 2005, when I found my way home to the folk, one of the very first places I went was the Ásatrú Alliance. And so this hammer was bought through their store and blessed by Valgard Murray at my request. And then I bought the chain, had a local jeweler here, affixed the chain through the thing, but this is, they called it the Big Swede because it is a historic replica. It was based on a find somewhere in Sweden that they mocked up this hammer from. And yes, it is and thank you for that compliment. It is a beautiful piece and one that I wear literally all the time.
So I apologize for my anglicized mispronunciation of that province, state of Sweden. Skåne, I think, is how you pronounce it in Svenska. I'm not sure. Looks like Skane, but I don't think it's pronounced that way. What's up next? Matt and Alan, my 11-year-old in Boy Scouts is being bullied in quotation marks, or in parentheses rather, covert, mild striking, and threats to kill him by a 15-year-old patrol leader. It's being excused as boys being boys. I disagree. When would you draw the line between boys being boys and taking it as a violation and abuse of the patrol leader's power? Help a mom out here. Alan, what say you?
Well, that certainly a couple things. Boys will be boys. Good night, Aubrey. But there's a line that obviously is being crossed. First, I assume that you're documenting this through through the hierarchy of the pack, like with the I forget now what the upper levels of but I guess like the pack leaders, the parents who are in charge of this troop are hopefully being made aware that that's going on, number one. And then I'll tell you like two stories that make me very proud as a parent. My oldest son was being bullied by an older boy in elementary school. And I picked it up because I could just tell from his vibe, he didn't want to go to school. He wasn't the happy, bright, yay, I'm going to school. It didn't take very long. Asked him what's going on. He said, this kid's bullying me. I said, next time he does it, knock him down. And so the kid got in his face that day. And my boy grabbed him by the chest, swept his legs out from under him, landed on top of him, and said, leave me alone. And the kid never bothered him again. And, that's one of those pivotal moments, I think, because I gave him permission to stand up for himself. It happened again later. And again, it's odd. It was a similar age difference. We were having a party at the house and the kids were playing basketball. And all of a sudden, there's melee on the basketball court, and Preston took a swing at this kid. And so the other kid gets on top of him, much older. Again, I think the ages were not, if it wasn't 11, 15, it was very close to that. It was 12 and 16 or 10 and 13, whatever it was. But the other kid was older, bigger. But before he could, I pulled him apart. And my boy told me, he was calling me names. I was blocking his shots. I was playing well, and the kid didn't like it, was calling him names. So my boy took him down, and instead of punishing him, I'm like, good, he had it coming. And then having had 3 or 4 beers myself, I gave that kid's father a good tongue lashing too. So as long as the stuff is being reported up the chain, I would have no qualms saying the next time that 15-year-old thumps your kid's ear or whatever, I'd turn around and smack him right in the button, right here, right in the sternum, and just knock his wind out. I mean, you don't want to go for the face, and it's unfair to go for the cods, but otherwise, the kid's got it coming.
So details matter. Allen is a father of boys and a eminent legal mind. He knows these things in a way the rest of us don't. I would say
that's not legal advice. That's parenting advice.
I'm just saying you have wisdom that transcends the regular parenting experience in a way. Yeah, document stuff. It's really important that you document stuff. Everybody document things. Documenting is important. But the other thing is, you ask, boys being boys, maybe, but it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be responded to. We talked earlier, kids test boundaries all the time with each other, with other things. It might be boys being boys. We live in a world today that's a little bit scarier to where you have to, take a different look at that sometimes. But just because it is doesn't mean that something shouldn't be done or your kid shouldn't assert himself. What I think is really important is the less it looks like mommy stepping in and asserting herself for him, the better served he is going to be.
Right.
And I don't know your son, so I can't. Every kid's different, but if he's able to assert himself and do it himself, that's going to be very beneficial. If he's not, and it needs to be done a different way, just being very aware that the more it looks like mommy stepping in and asserting herself for him, he's going to suffer consequences of that socially as well too, and it's something to think about.
And and the more that you like, if you tell them to bottle it up, that's that also has negative long-term consequences. And and if it's being passed off like, oh, it's just boys being boys, well, so is getting smacked in the face with a 2x4. Again, I wouldn't go to a weapon to begin with. So is getting your wind knocked out of you, with a sucker punch. Because when you're the smaller kid, you're entitled to the first punch.
Yeah.
You don't need to give them warning. If you find yourself in a fair fight, your tactics suck.
So it's funny because this is the voice of reason that's always in my head when I don't overspeak, when I'm worried about giving questionably legally defensible advice. This is the person I would call to ask for it. So I find the situation we're in humorous, and I in no way disagree. So yeah, there you have it. No, seriously, none of us mean to make light of it. If it's something that genuinely is messing with your kid and making him scared or making him uncomfortable and it's persistent, I would say of all the options mentioned, the bottling it up option is the one I would recommend least. That's very seldom the way to go. So it's important, it matters, and I appreciate you coming to us and asking us about it. And I would venture this, I would volunteer the Lawspeaker if you wanted to give him a call, and if there were more to it that was necessary to flesh out in more detail, I think he'd be happy to have that conversation with you.
1,000%.
Have you seen the AFA's Wikipedia page lately? It looks a bit more fair and honest and less butthurt than it was in the past. It changed the wording from white supremacist to white nationalist international Asatru organization. We're white nationalist international.
There you go.
We're
worldwide,
but nationalists. Okay, and even lists off all of the Hoffs, where they are, and when they were acquired, among other things. Alan, are you aware of recent changes to the AFA's Wikipedia page?
I'm not, I'm boycotting the AFA's Wikipedia page because like 2 times ago when I looked at it, it had a discussion about the time when me and you and Pat Hall stepped into the breach and picked up the leadership mantle of the AFA, and then several months later, I looked at it again, and that part was gone. So now I'm off the Wikipedia page. So what do I have to look at it for?
Yeah, the Wikipedia has been kind of funny for a long time. It was as if Steve did stuff, and then he passed the torch in 2016, and then nothing's happened. And that's insulting and ridiculous. Lots of really cool things happen. And it sounds like that is reflected at least in some way. And that was kind of my standard on Wikipedia. No part of me has ever thought Wikipedia is going to be fair or going to be, and I think this is the fair assessment, glowingly celebrating the Ásatrú Folk Assembly. But it was like intentionally, I had hoped that even with a negative slant, it would at least factually mention important things that happened, like the questioner or the guy who brought it to our attention mentioned, like, hey, it got this Hoff this time, it did this cool thing, it's doing this other thing, it has these food pantries at every one of our Hoffs. I was hoping that even if the tone was begrudging or negative, they would at least factually mention the data points of interesting things. And for a long time, it wouldn't. We've had a number of people try to update it and to add to it, and it was gate-kept by very ideologically opposed forces for a really long time that wouldn't allow anybody to even, change points of fact or, add unbiased points of fact things there. So I'm glad that it's made progress. I'm glad that it's better than it was. I think that Wikipedia is an ever-changing frontier, but I'm glad it has some cool stuff on there. I've not looked at it in a long time, so I was not aware of these changes. I saw another question that came through. Matt and Alan, what are your thoughts on gentle parenting versus spanking? Seems like real gentle parenting results in little tyrants in my experience. Alan, do you have thoughts on gentle spanking or gentle parenting versus spanking?
Yes, I do have thoughts about that. I was reading our Wikipedia page. Didn't mention me. So, yes. Here's what I think. And the way that, first of all, the term is discipline, right? It's not punishment. So yes, you should, I think spanking is, I wouldn't call it a last resort, but but I think it's a tool that you have to keep in the bag. I know boys and girls are different. I think girls respond more to deprivation type parenting or, punishment. We certainly did a lot of timeouts with our kids, for 1 minute per year. So for like a 4-year-old, having to stand in the corner for 4 minutes is an eternity and is enough to curb most of the errant behaviors. One of the things that I think with discipline, one of the things that we found work really well is to state expectations, right? We are going into this grocery store. You're going to sit in the cart and you're going to behave. And most of the time that worked. Now, all that being said, if you don't have some nuclear weapon out there at the end chain of this reasoning, right? If you don't have, like, if you try this and you try that and the kid's still acting out, if there's never a real punishment, then a lot kids test your boundaries. And I mean, that's what they do. That's what they're for. And so they are going to push it all the way out to past the outer limit. So yes, I think kids, boys especially, maybe need to be spanked occasionally just so that they know that that threat is real. That being said, it should be rare and just, only for the right occasion, and never to excess. It's funny. I still remember one of the books that we went by, and it worked really well for us. was called 1, 2, 3 Parenting, I think was the name of it. But you tell them 3 times, and like if they don't do it after the 3rd time, then there's punishment. But again, you have to do it every time, right? You have to be consistent. If you ever let it go and say, if you pull that, if you knock that blind down one more time, I'm gonna let you have it. And they do it again, and you make another threat, and they do it again, you make another threat. They're never going to respect you as a parent. It's just like any other leadership position. If your boss tells you, if you show up late for work one more time, I'm going to dock your pay. You show up late the next day and you get your full pay, you're never going to be on time. Same thing. I still remember the bumper sticker out in the county one day. I was driving around out and on some old farmer's pickup truck, it said, if you don't spank your kids, they may turn out to be Democrats.
There you go. So I want to first say, Alan, I share your frustration. I am also not mentioned in the AFA's Wikipedia page. So I feel your pain. I think that is an unfortunate oversight. There's a couple of things. First, I think you're certainly spot on about you have to follow through. If you say do this or else that. And again, this is coming from 5 years as a parent, so take it for what
a daughter.
Take it for what's that's worth. A spanking does not need to be a savage beating where the consequence is physical damage or even physical pain. That doesn't have to be, and that shouldn't be the case. So I think some people have some strange ideas of what that means in reality. It is shocking and kind of takes out of the comfort zone that somebody's popping their bubble and giving them a swat on the butt, but it's not like a hurting them thing. That's not really the message of it. And there's, I can think of twice that I've spanked Aubrey. It was not like savage spanking, but it was one time we were downtown and she started running amok amongst the street and cars and stuff. And I hollered for her to stop and she didn't listen. And I was very stern on it. So no, I got her and I gave her a swat and I said, hey, no, you listen. This is for your safety. There's cars here. You can get run over. You do what I tell you when we're out here, because it was important and she needed to know it was important. The other one was, something. And I'm like, hey, if you say that again, I'm going to give you a spanking. And she made the point of like turning around and looking and saying it again and walking off. So yeah, I got up and I swatted her and she gets it now. I'm not going to say I'm going to do something and then that's the thing. There's probably a lot of right ways to do it, but don't paint yourself in a corner. don't draw lines that you don't intend to enforce. Don't say you're going to do things. And I know sometimes this is a discrepancy against mothers and fathers, like different ones of them are better or not at this. And sometimes that probably depends on the gender of the kid. But yeah, don't tell them, if you do this, I will do Y. If you do X, then I will do Y, and then not do Y. It's really important. And you're in control of when you make that threat or that promise or whatever you want to phrase it as. Then just don't say it if you don't want to enforce it. It's like, it's like when people are writing a movie or something else. If it doesn't make sense and you can't do it right and it's a work of fiction and you wrote it, then just don't write yourself in a corner. Come up with something else. If you're in control of the situation, you can figure out where to do that or not. But them knowing that you mean what you say and you say what you mean and that you follow through with what you say is really important. The magic of counting, I don't understand why it works, but it does. It's really frustrating. I feel like that children should just do what the parents tell them sometimes and all be good. And there wouldn't be a problem. I mean, just on like simple things. Hey, Aubrey, stop playing. Put on your clothes. Aubrey, we're not playing. We're getting dressed. Get dressed. Aubrey, get dressed. Folk, get 1, 2. I can't get to 3 before she's like on task, zoned in. And it hasn't been accompanied by me adding any kind of threat or any kind of anything to that. But the idea of counting to something magically seems to motivate that. And I don't know why it works, but it does. Shouldn't have to be like that, but it do. All right. So last question tonight, but I think an interesting one. And again, I have not had this talk, so I would not be informative on this, but Alan might be. What is the appropriate age to have the talk? We live in a hypersexualized society today, so it's getting harder to avoid. What say you, Lawspeaker?
I let my kids learn the old-fashioned way, from...
They watch the farm animals?
No, from the older kids in school. The honest answer to the question is, probably around 12. If I had to put a thumbnail on it, that would probably be, like right before puberty. Just because, you want, like, before the hormones take over and make them all crazy. Apparently that never subsides, but before the hormones set in, at least let them get a framework established for what's coming, because the talk, is not just about their own sex and procreation. It's also about being, probably maybe especially for girls, but to be able to rationally defend themselves against inappropriate behavior from other kids directed toward them, or inappropriate behavior they may direct at other kids. I mean, you gotta give them a framework for understanding all that stuff, so that it's not TikTok and whatever the rest of the crap is that's out there.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting one. I don't know everybody else's experience, but I've never had the talk. Like, there was never a formal, like, all right, let's sit you down and tell you what goes where and stuff. That didn't happen. I was able to kind of figure that out through regular interaction and,
the older kids in school. That's the way it's
the
supposed
older kids in school, the older kids in the neighborhood, just like things. You catch stuff on TV when you're, not supposed to be paying attention, or you just kind of become aware of stuff. gradually over time in a more contextualized way. I think that and I think that that's interesting that you brought up, because I think that's important. There's like, don't let people touch you in certain spots talk. That's probably real different than this is how babies get made talk. And I know the other talk is really important for them to understand young. And I think that's a little bit different question. I remember in elementary school, we would frequently have to watch and it was kind of paired, or at least in my recollection, it was paired with the school bus safety videos. But there was like, don't get run over by the school bus, but also don't let people touch you in ways that you don't like talk. Right. And it was always strange. There was one we had to watch where it was like dinosaurs like stepping on a cat's tail a bunch, and like, don't do that, I don't like that, or something. It was some kind of a strange cartoon that really didn't make any sense. And then there was different ones, as we got older, but that one is an odd one. So Alan, as a I guess response, how would you address the why you don't go run around naked in public, and how you avoid perverts that might have bad intention for you kind of talk?
Sorry, my battery was running low. I forgot to plug this in. I think that, and that may even be a talk that needs to happen with younger kids, maybe even just not too long after they start school. Looking back, I'm not sure that we ever had that discussion with our kids exactly, mostly because my kids were pretty defensive as it was about stuff. And and even then, there's a balance, right? I think although I jokingly said it earlier, about stranger danger, I think that is grossly overstated now. But, you certainly want to make, and this I think is part of the overall arc of good faith parenting, right? Like you're not your kid's friend, but you can be his confidant. And, and that's why, like, when they tell you stuff, you can't be too freaked out about it. And there's some other stories that I'll share in personal company in that range, but so that you can know that if something like that ever started to happen, that they would tell you. And I think that's the important aspect of parenting overall, because you can't plan for and anticipate the stuff that's going to go wacky. You just have to be kind of open and flow with the circumstances. But if your kids know that you have their back and that you're going to stand up for them and do what's right for them and do what's right by them, then they will tell you if somebody's bullying them, or if somebody's, leering at them in the bus or whatever. If they will tell you, and most of the time I think our kids will, then you don't have to be so hyper vigilant about all the minutia, because yes, there are 100,000 things that can go wrong, but only 1 or 4 are going to manifest, and it's going to be the one that you're not looking for. So you just be open to communication from your child, watch his mood, be engaged and mindful, in your interactions with them, and you'll be able to pick up on it, just like I picked up on my son's thing about school.
All right, guys. Well, Alan, thank you for joining me this evening and talking to us all about parenting with your, vast experience at it. That is certainly beneficial to hear and to learn from. And it's a really good topic tonight. Everybody be excited. We got Freyshoff in Austintown, Ohio. Look, behold, it's amazing. Hail Frey. And
hell yeah, Faye.
Absolutely. So be excited about that because it's really cool and I'm happy to share it and I'm super proud of it. And so that's the thing. Also, have kids, have white babies.
If you have 6 or 8, one of them's sure to turn out pretty
There you
okay.
go. Have an abundance of them and have them with somebody that you plan on raising them with, because that is problematic if you don't. Do that and help each other and realize that you have an entire community here in the Asatru Folk Assembly that is very invested in helping you to be the best parent you can be and your children to get raised in the best way possible. All of us would love to help any of the children in the AFA any way we can and help any of the parents in the AFA to be supported, to be maximally successful. So yeah, you're part of a community. We're here for you, and we're all very invested in the success of your family. And we need to be there for each other.
And before we leave, we talked about Freyshoff, but there's still one more thing coming up in a couple weeks that Witten Erickson's got to get done before he can dedicate that Hoff. And you didn't talk about it today.
I did not, because the other news kind of overshadowed it, but thank you for reminding us. So, in October, and Nick's going to throw the dates up for me. Yay! October 10th through the 12th, we have Winter Nights in New Hampshire. Winter Nights is going to be awesome. It's beautiful that time of year up there. It is an amazing spot. It's on our folk builder Ron Boardman's property there, which is wonderful. It was a great time at that location last year. I am looking forward to it again this year. I will be there. I hope that many of you will be there. If you want to be there, get in touch with your local folk builder. They can get you all set up. But yeah, I would love to meet you there. Got a lot of cool things to talk about. A number of AFA leaders in the eastern half of the country are going to be up there. The Ericksons are going to be hosting it. They've got a lot of cool things to tell us about, and it would be to your benefit to meet them and make their acquaintance because they're fantastic people. I would love to meet all you guys. It's going to be really cool. I am excited for it. Join us, Winter Nights 14. Wow, time goes by. Anyways, Winter Nights 14 in New Hampshire this year. So join us if you can, October 10th through 12th. But yeah, with that, thank you, Alan, and I look forward to talking to you guys next week, if not before. Hail the Iseer, hail the folk, hail Freyr, and remember, victory never sleeps.